Access Football 2024 is not a Madden killer, but it is closer to being a Madden killer than Access Football 2023 is. Hello there, everyone. It's another Broly 555 TV game review, and it's another review of another Access Football game. This time we'll be reviewing Access Football 2024, the football game that's like Madden and NFL head coach rolled into one game. Now, if you watched last year's review of Access Football 2023, you would have seen me claim that Access Football 2023 was the best Access Football game to date and was a really good football game, even though it was not a Madden killer. Well, I'm sitting here today to let you know that Access Football 2024 is not a Madden killer, but it is closer to being a Madden killer than Access Football 2023 is. It is definitely a better game than Access Football 2023 and is definitely the best entry yet in the Access Football franchise by Access Games. Let's start off by talking about the pros of Access Football 2024. After the gameplay in Access Football 2023 was a huge leap forward from previous Access Football games, the gameplay in Access Football 2024 has made another solid leap forward with new additions and tweaks. For example, after having the same rosters for the default teams for years, and after people complained about it for years, the rosters for the default teams are now different. Some players are rated better or worse than previous games in the franchise. Some players are on different teams than they were in last year's game. Some players are brand new to the game, etc. Another thing you'll notice is that there is now a bigger talent gap between teams than in previous years. In past games, there would be one or two bad teams, one or two great teams, and everyone else would be varying degrees of mid or really good. In Access Football 2024, there are a handful of teams that are really bad, a handful of teams that are elite or really good, and the rest of the teams are generally bad on one side of the ball and good on the other side of the ball. Whether that be bad on offense, good on defense, or good on offense, bad on defense. Another thing you'll notice is that there are some small but impressive additions to the in-game presentation in Access Football 2024 that feels like Access Games is beginning to lay a foundation for an ESPN-style TV broadcast in future games. What do I mean by this? Well, there is a new scoreboard user interface that looks to emulate the ESPN format, and there's even an Access Football League Network symbol on the scoreboard that is similar in look to the ESPN logo. On the first offensive possession for both teams, the starting lineups for the offense and defense will scroll across the bottom of the screen, showing the player names, portraits, positions, and overall player ratings. On the scoreboard ticker before every play, it tells you how many wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends are on the field, and it gives you the names and numbers of each one of those players. Another thing you'll notice in Access Football 2024 is that after having only one blocking animation in all previous Access Football games, the physics and animations for offensive line play, defensive line play, and general blocking have been completely redone, resulting in Access Football 2024 having 75 new blocking animations. This has led to some smooth and realistic looking play between the offensive and defensive lines, and following your blockers on running plays is even more effective than it was in last year's game. Another thing you'll notice is that player animations and physics have been refined to be smoother and look more realistic. Player clipping doesn't happen as often as in last year's game. New AI logic was added to this year's game, as well as the AI being made more aggressive on offense and defense, which has led to the AI in Access Football 2024 being the most challenging in the series thus far. Also, a bunch of new formations and plays were added to the game, giving users a much bigger playbook to work with on both sides of the ball. This includes designed QB run plays on offense, which were not in any of the previous Access Football games. Another thing you'll notice is that offensive pass interference penalties, defensive holding penalties, and encroachment penalties have been added to the game. This not only helps the game become less predictable when penalties are called, but it's the first time that I can remember offensive pass interference and defensive holding penalties ever being called in a football video game before, despite the fact that they are called in real life on a regular basis. This realism helps make Access Football's gameplay more lifelike and helps their game do an even better job of simulating actual football than the Madden games do. You'll notice after every play, the CPU-controlled team's previous play call will show up on screen. It will also tell you how many times that play has been called and how many yards are gained, given up on average when the play is called, depending upon whether it was an offensive or defensive play. This feature was copied from Maximum Football 2020, just like most of the new features Access Football has added to their game over the past couple of years. You'll also notice that if for some reason you need to quit the game, Access Football 2024 now saves your progress, so that if you need to quit and go do something else for a while, you can come back and resume your game where you left off instead of having to start over. This is another feature that Access Football copied from Maximum Football 2020. Of course, like all the other features that Access Football copied from Maximum Football 2020, Access Football is executing them better. The concepts are definitely a ripoff of Maximum Football 2020, and there's nothing wrong with doing that at all. Also, in a move that seemed to be in response to the football gaming community gushing over the pretty graphics in the upcoming Maximum Football game by Modus Games, the folks at Access Games decided to roll out new player models in Access Football 2024. While these player models aren't as detailed as the ones found in Football Simulator and the upcoming Maximum Football game, they are more detailed and better looking than last year's player models. Another thing you'll notice is that 2 new stadiums were added to the game, Louisiana and Las Vegas, bringing the stadium total up to 23 stadiums. This is remarkable because if you go back to Access Football 2020, there was only like 7 or 8 different stadiums you could play in that game. Now there's 23. That's a pretty significant increase in just a couple of years. Also, you'll notice that the stadium models and the crowds in the stadium look good. Not quite as good as in Football Simulator or the upcoming Maximum Football game, but they look good nonetheless. They certainly aren't ugly. You'll also notice that the play-by-play announcers in Access Football 2024 are the same guys who did the play-by-play commentary in the old NFL 2K games, specifically NFL 2K5, and also they were used, or at least one of them was used, in All-Pro Football 2K8. The Deep Franchise mode of Access Football 2023 returns in Access Football 2024, a franchise mode deeper than any franchise mode since Madden 12. That being said, there are some new features added to the franchise mode in Access Football 2024. You can now customize the size of your leagues. If you do the tier system, you can have leagues with 36, 30, 24, or 18 teams in them. If you do the NFL league format, which is called American style, you can have leagues of 32, 24, 16, or 8 teams in them. And the ability to create 18 leagues in Access Football 2024's franchise mode will allow people to recreate leagues like the USFL and the XFL. Also new to the franchise mode is a team activity page that allows you to track all of your trades, free agent signings, draft picks, player releases, and trades. And it not only keeps track of these things for your team, but it also keeps track of these things for every team in the league. You'll also know when you're scouting players in franchise mode that there are more talented players in the draft pool for your scouts to look at. In Access Football 2023, the best players in the entire country that you could scout were only like C++. But now, when you go to the draft pool and scout players, you'll notice that there's several players that are like a B, an A-, an A, an A+, etc., as far as their expected overall rating. And then you can scout them from there. The Team Creation Suite from the previous 2 Access Football games is back in Access Football 2024. This year, they added more logos for users to pick from when creating their teams, and they added the ability to delete any teams that a user may create, which users were not able to do in Access Football 2023. Also new to Access Football 2024 is a new feature called Playbook Editor. This playbook editor allows users to create their own offensive and defensive playbooks. Every formation and play that exists in the default playbooks is available for selection in this feature, and users can select which of those formations and plays will be used in their playbooks. This not only allows users to condense their playbooks so that they spend less time selecting their plays in games, but this also allows users to adjust their playbooks if they run into a team that their normal plays don't work against. This feature would have been even better if the ability to create your own formations and plays was present in the game, but sadly, the folks at Access Games did not have the time to add that into their playbook editor, a task that will be delegated to next year's game. Another thing you'll notice is that the design of the main menus and the main menu is the best looking in the entire series, and the music is as great as ever. They even managed to get an artist's song to become part of the soundtrack, even though I don't know who the artist is or what the name of the song is. When you play the game and you hear the song, you'll know what I'm talking about. This kind of music helps Access Football 2024 feel more like a AAA title instead of the indie game that they are. Lastly, but definitely not least, there are no pay-to-win game modes that are de facto gambling systems like in Madden present in Access Football 2024. You just pay $20 to get the game either on Steam or Xbox or PlayStation, and that's it. You get the full game experience. You don't have to spend money to get any kind of competitive advantage or even just to be competitive. You just drop $20, you get the game, and you have fun. Now, let's talk about the cons of Access Football 2024 because, sadly, there are cons. One such negative about Access Football 2024 is that there are no other game modes other than Play Now and Franchise Mode. Also, there's no online play, which to me is not even a negative because I'm not much of an online player when it comes to sports games. But for some people, they live for online play in sports games, and so Access Football 2024 not having online play is definitely a negative to those people. Another negative for some is that the player and stadium models in Access Football 24, while good, they're not as detailed and pretty to look at as the player and stadium models of games like Football Simulator and Maximum Football by Modus Games. This is not a turnoff for me, and Access Football 2024 definitely looks good, but for some, they're obsessed with a football game that looks super duper pretty and realistic, and so they'll be more likely to play Football Simulator or Maximum Football than Access Football based on just that. Another negative for Access Football 2024 is that players have no control over when the ball carrier uses a stiff arm or hurdles a defender in a break tackle situation. Now, for the most part, the AI is pretty good at calling breaking tackle plays in the right scenarios. They're usually pretty appropriate when it comes to stiff arming or just simply shedding a defender or hurdling a defender. It all happens contextually and automatically once you get in the scenario. But it would help the game's gameplay a lot and increase the level of control that users want if you are able to decide, hey, if I press this button, I stiff arm. If I press this button, I hurdle. Other indie football games like Maximum Football 2020 gave the users control over when to use a stiff arm or when to hurdle a defender in order to break tackles. And so having that kind of user control in a future Access Football title would do the folks at Access Games a lot of good. Also, there is no ability to call fair catches on punt returns or kickoffs, which is a bit strange because that's part of real-life football, and most football games that have ever existed have these features, the ability to call fair catches on punts and kickoffs. So it would behoove the folks at Access Games to get this into the game as soon as possible, especially since it's such a basic and fundamental part of real-life football. And while not horrible, another negative for the game is that the on-field player sounds could be better. And even though the play-by-play announcers for Access Football are the exact kind of announcers you want, the lines that they say in the game have literally been the same lines since Access Football 19, so they definitely need to have some new lines to say in future Access Football titles. Now, when it comes to scoring Access Football 2024, I really can only score it one way. The gameplay, I give a 9 out of 10. Not only is the user-controlled gameplay highly improved from previous years and is the best yet from Access Football, but the game also perfectly emulates the ability to coach games like you could in NFL Head Coach. So instead of playing a game or watching the CPU play your game for you, you can literally enter coach mode where you call the plays and then you watch the CPU control your team and try to execute the plays that you call, just like an NFL Head Coach. Because the head coach part of the game is done perfectly, and because the gameplay for the user-controlled games is so improved, I give the gameplay in Access Football 2024 a 9 out of 10. For the graphics, I give Access Football 2024 an 8 out of 10, just like in last year's game. Now, the player models and the stadium models in Access Football 2024 definitely look the best they ever have in the entire series, but they're not enough of an improvement from Access Football 2023 for me to give the graphics a higher score than last year. So the graphics are an 8 out of 10. For sound, I give the game an 8 out of 10. Player sounds are the same as last year. Color commentary lines are the same as last year. But like usual, the music in the menus is banging, and there's no horrible sound quality in the game, although there's definitely room for improvement. So when I factor in all the sounds, I give the sound an 8 out of 10. Now, presentation, I increased to a 9 out of 10. The ESPN-like scoreboard ticker at the top of the screen and the starting lineups on the bottom of the screen on each team's first possession are a very nice touch. The previous play call of CPU-controlled teams looks really good, and the main menus look more fantastic than they ever have before, and the music in the menus is the best in the entire series. So because of that, I give the presentation a 9 out of 10. And in terms of replay value, Access Football 2024 gets a 10 out of 10. The ability to create your own teams from scratch, in addition to customizing every detail of the 36 default teams, has a lot of replay value in itself. But when you are able to create your own teams from scratch and you have a deep feature-rich franchise mode that you can use your created team in, and you now have the ability to create your own offensive and defensive playbooks, that gives Access Football 2024 a lot of replay value as a football sandbox. And so because of that, I give the replay value of Access Football 2024 a 10 out of 10. And this gives a final score for Access Football 2024 an 8.8 out of 10. So now that you've seen the score that I have given Access Football 2024, this is the part of my video review where, as a fan of the Access Football franchise, I would like to give some suggestions on what needs to be added in future Access Football games in order to help the game get to the next level, where not only will I think it's an amazing game, but most people will share that same opinion if they add the features that I'm about to suggest. First off, players need to have more control over when the ball carrier uses a stiff arm, hurdles a defender, or breaks a tackle in general. I know I said that earlier in the review, but that bears reiteration here, because the more control users have when playing a football game, the more satisfied they generally will be. Another thing that needs to be added to the game is in-game instant replays, which initially were going to be added in this game, but due to time constraints and just not enough people working on the game at the moment, they were unable to get to in this game. But I did hear from Danny Eugen at some point on Discord in the last month or so that instant replays will be in next year's game. There also needs to be a practice mode that can be accessed both inside and outside of franchise mode. And there needs to be a play editor that allows you to create your own formations and plays, which That particular feature is planned to be in Access Football 2025. Now, these last three suggested features I give you are very important because not only does Maximum Football 2020, the game that seems to be driving a lot of the innovation for Access Football, not only did Maximum Football 2020 have in-game instant replays and a practice mode and a play editor that allowed you to create your own plays within existing formations, but Football Simulator also has those features. Football Simulator has an in-game instant replay system that I would argue is maybe the best one I've ever seen in a football game. Football Simulator also has a practice mode that can be accessed both inside and outside of their game's franchise mode. And Football Simulator has a play editor similar to Maximum Football 2020 where you can create new plays within pre-existing formations, except Football Simulator does it better than Maximum Football 2020 did. In order for Access Football to stay ahead of their competition in the indie football gaming market, they really need to add in-game instant replays, a practice mode, and a play editor to their games, especially since they have competition within their own niche market that already has these features. Another feature that would be great for Access Football to add would be new lines and commentary for the play-by-play announcers. There also needs to be some kind of pre-game and post-game show in order for players and casual watchers to feel like they are watching a real football game on TV. Now, Football Simulator has a really good pre-game show, but it's Sunday Rivals that does an amazing job of having a pre-game show, a post-game show, where players actually get interviewed, and a halftime show where you see scrolling social media posts by people regarding the game that you're playing. If Access Football could do something like this, their game would go to the next level as far as presentation goes. Another thing that should be done in future Access Football games is that there should be something called Access Tracks, which would be a playlist of every menu music soundtrack from every Access Football game ever made. Players should be allowed to access this playlist of soundtracks and decide for themselves which soundtrack plays in the background in the menus, whether it be the main menu, the Create a Playbook menu, or a future play editing menu, or whether they're in the franchise mode menus. And of course, lastly, at some point, preferably after all this other stuff is done, the folks at Access Football need to add online play, especially in online franchise mode. That eventually needs to be done in order to attract a wider audience. And one last feature that I just thought of that would be cool is if Access Football in the future could add the ability to control more than one team with a user in their offline franchise mode. This would allow people like me and my best friend the Gravy Man to play in the same franchise mode without needing to play over the internet. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my official, honest review of Access Football 2024. As you can see, I am very impressed by what the folks at Access Games were able to put out this year, and I am hopeful for where this series can go in the future, especially with the Madden games by EA Sports continuing to go down the toilet. If you enjoyed my review, be sure to subscribe to the channel, check out my other videos, and leave your likes and comments down below. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next game review video.